presentation covers the qualities and responsibilities of a Provincial Assistant Grand Director Ceremonies of this province of Warwickshire, together with the latest guidance regarding COVID-19 and how to proclaim a worshipful master. And of course, the term proclamation, if you ask a DC what proclamation means, their knees start to shake and they think, oh my goodness, I've got to learn all these dates and everything else. But of course, a proclamation is what we do when we bring a worshipful master or confer a worshipful master into the chair for a second time if he's continuing in office. But the term proclamations, as I say to a DC, is really where we assist in a presentation that's given to a brother. If they're having a long service presentation or presentation certificate of merit or a promotion on the floor, and that's where we recite part of the journey that the brother has been on and part of their CV to give the salient dates and details of the events in their journey in Masonry. So there are two versions of proclamations. So without further ado, if I can introduce myself, you all know me, I think, but and before you all shout at the laptops, I do know who I am. I mean, I haven't lost my memory. I might have some shortcomings, but I haven't lost my memory yet, hopefully. So I am Peter Clark, and I'm the Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies. And I was appointed, and we saw David Purser earlier, and I was appointed with David and back in the 2011 as a Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies, and then continued in 2012. And then I became a visiting officer, 2013, Provincial Deputy Grand Director of Ceremonies in 2015 and 16. And of course, I then was installed as the Provincial Grand Director of Ceremonies in November 2017. And that's been renewed in May 18, 19, and virtually this year. And I was very fortunate to be appointed Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies of the United Grand Lodge of England earlier on this year. So that's 7 years as a provincial DC, and that covers hundreds of installation meetings, many centenaries, banner dedications, our annual church service, proclamations for long service, the controlling role in the Provincial Grand Lodge meeting, and other events that we handle during the time that we're a DC in the province. So why am I sharing this with you? Not because I've got a big head, it's simply to say that as a DC, do I ever take for granted my experience and knowledge that I've gained in the various jobs, roles I've had as a DC in the province? And the answer is a very categoric no. And what happens if I do, or if you do as a DC? The answer is it bites you on the triple X in very short shrift. And do I know everything there is to know about what we do as DCs? And the answer is no, believe it or not. And the reason why is that every meeting is special. And unless we as DCs are in control of absolutely every element of the proceedings, and trust me, sometimes, brethren, we are, the unexpected can happen. And frequently it does. But our knowledge and experience does provide us with a very large resource to tap into. And frequently we manage such situations purely from that experience. Luckily, the new Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies and the new Provincial Wardens receive a playbook that I wrote that attempts to cover every potential scenario. And we'll go into that in a bit, but there's a copy there. So that's who we are. So what are the duties, primary duties of a Warwickshire Director of Ceremonies? Well, we are there to support the Right Worshipful Provincial Grand Master and to carry out the duties as such at installation meetings, at centenaries, banner dedications, the long service presentations, at the Provincial Grand Lodge meeting, our annual church service, and other events. And if you all recall, we had the wonderful opportunity to consecrate a new lodge, which the province handled. And so there are other events, obviously, that take place where we assist. But all of the events that you've all been to, that we all enjoy, there's a DC involved somewhere in all of those events. And the role is to support and serve. I mean, obviously the presentation is about what is the role of an ADC. Well, primarily it's to support and serve. And it's to deliver the Provincial Grand Lodge ceremonial to the standards that have been laid down over many years. And it's also to demonstrate by example the standards of protocol and etiquette that the brethren of our province deserve from their acting officers. And I went into some detail on that on the previous presentation I had the pleasure of giving. So as an acting escorting DC for the province, there are two types of people that we escort. There's the ruler and there's a representative. And just for clarity, the ruler is a term which is used to describe our provincial Grand Master, our deputy provincial Grand Master, and or assistant provincial Grand Master, of which we have 4 in the province at the moment. They are entitled by right to be escorted into the lodge, accompanied by Grand Officers, and escorted by officers of Provincial Grand Lodge to open the lodge and to assume authority over it. And in Warwickshire, this right is exercised in all but exceptional circumstances, and usually indicates and includes the opening of the lodge and the taking of the minutes. A representative does not enjoy the same right to open or to be escorted into lodge, and will refuse the gavel if it's offered by the Worshipful Master. And of course, the Worshipful Master can invite any past master to take his chair, but the representatives will gracefully decline that. He does, though, sit to the right of the Worshipful Master in open lodge, and a representative might be a Grand Officer, but in a large number of cases, the Provincial Senior and Junior Grand Wardens act as the representatives at the events that we have and the meetings in the province. The representative brings the greetings of the Right Worshipful Provincial Grand Master to the lodge during the second rising, and he'll also deliver the address to the Master during the installation meetings. And we're currently going through the training of that, and Worshipful Brother Andrew and Worshipful Brother Trevor have already demonstrated that they've got it mostly under their belts, which is great to see. The representative does, however, have the honour of being escorted out of the lodge after visitors' greetings have been given, should he wish to do so. So there's a differential there, that the ruler has the right to enter any lodge and assume authority over it, and the representative is there representing the Right Worshipful Provincial Grand Master. So what are the qualities to become a Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies? Well, I'm frequently asked by brethren, I'd love to become an ADC of the province. How do I make it happen? Well, as we know, with our hobby, we never ask for anything. Favour comes our way if and when we are recognised as having earned any honour that's bestowed upon us. That's the wonderful thing, isn't it, of our hobby. Things just happen because of the work we put in, the reward for the labour, if you like. Certainly if you're in Freemasonry and you just think it's a vehicle to take you to the top, then we all know that you're in the wrong hobby, because that's not what it's about. The phrase, what you find praiseworthy in others, is a very good way of developing your skills as a DC. And once you've acquired certain skills, we should then continue to hone and perfect them, thus learning from our own experience and development as we go along. So the qualities of a Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremony effectively are that the qualities needed, rather, to become an ADC of the province can be learnt. They can be learnt, but the foundations need to be present in both the personality and commitment a brother makes in their journey through the offices in the lodge, and the ability they display in carrying out the playlets in the various degrees of our order. And the role of ADC is seen as a reflection of the contribution a brother can make, not just in their ability to carry out ritual and ceremonial with accuracy and with authority, but in demonstrating by their conduct the very best the province of Warwickshire has to offer. Provincial officers, including ADCs, are appointed personally by the Right Worshipful Provincial Grand Master. They are therefore very high honours to receive when you receive appointment. So if that's some of the qualities that you need as a DC, a provincial DC, what are the qualities you do not need? Well, a provincial DC does not need to be a sergeant major, a sufferer of OCD, a narrow-minded personality, stop smiling, a star attraction, someone who does not listen. He does not need to be someone who believes they are better than others. He does not need to be someone good at telling others what to do, but not able to take criticism back. Does not need to be someone who believes their way is always the best. Someone who relishes the opportunity to step into the limelight. Can't think of anybody. And they don't need to be a panacea of everything Masonic and worldly. However, there are times when a moderately small amount of all of the above are essential to get the job done. But a good ADC knows exactly how to manage and balance such needs without causing any offence and by simply adding to the pleasure of the whole event. So let's have a look at some more words of wisdom that refer to the role and the personality and the attributes of a director of ceremonies, be that in a lodge or within the province. My favourite saying is, we all live in the now. You cannot have a DC that drifts off. Oh, sorry, there's a cat going across the lawn. I'll be back with you in a minute. Oh, sorry. No. You cannot drift off. You have to remain in the now and understand exactly where you are in the ceremonies. You know what's coming next. And you also have to be aware if there are any issues developing that you may have to take some action on. It's all about support. It's all about serving and support. We stay in the now. We don't drift off. It's exactly like an actor. Your life, you're on stage, you've only got one shot at this, particularly when we do such things as proclamations and that piece of work we do after the presentation has been done just to reinforce the journey that a brother has been on. We've only got one shot at that, and a brother, if he's getting a 50-year certificate, he can't do another 50 years so he can get it right a second time. So you have to be really on it and living in the now and prepared. So we plan and prepare. That's another significant attribute that a DC has, is willingness to really put the work in and make sure that everything that is going to take place is done so, not by luck or by judgment, or certainly by judgment, but not by luck. It is done against a plan. So we hit the marks, we hit the timings, things happen when they should happen. As a DC, you lead by example, and that's in the way we conduct ourselves, both inside lodge and outside in the festive board. Just not being the sergeant major, as I said earlier, not being approachable. We have to be approachable. We have to work with all brethren. We have to be committed. It's not true, the myth that we're out every day of the week. We do get Sundays off, but no, we're not out every day of the week. An ADC might do 10 to 15 meetings on the way through to Christmas, and about the same the other side. And we work as a team, and there's a real support structure that you have within the DC's team in the province. So we're not out every night, but we do like everybody to get the same experience and the opportunity to do some of the real nice jobs that we get to do, such as proclamations and the special meetings, ceremonies, the centenaries, etc. We do our preparation, which I've mentioned before. Etiquette and protocol we covered previously, but again, we are examples of that, and we are guardians of it as well. Not that we are the Sergeant Major, but we are there to make sure that we can help lodges with very gentle guidance and gentle reminders, things they might want to discuss at an officers' meeting if we've noticed something not quite right. As we know, local lodges, all lodges, private lodges have local traditions. So you don't go stomping over everything with great big boots, but we do have to have an understanding of what is the expected etiquette and protocol and live by them. Communications are very important in terms of how we interact with the lodges. So a DC's got to have very good interaction skills, and also the way that we prepare the documents and the information that we're going to share with the ruler that we are due to be escorting, or the representative that we're due to be escorting. And we do that by working with and communicating with the lodge secretaries, the lodge DC, worshipful master of the lodge that we're going to be visiting. We have a set number of questions that the DC has to prepare. So a DC has to be a good administrator as well as being good at ritual and ceremonial. And we do prepare a cue card which goes to the person that we are supporting and escorting. And I'll show you a copy of the cue card in a minute. A DC, the qualities, we need to be, if we use an analogy of the orchestra, we're certainly not the lead violinist. That's somebody else's job. We're a conductor. We're just there quietly making things happen, making sure that certain things happen at the right time and that the thing comes together in the way that it should, so that the key people who are there can relax and enjoy what they do without worrying that certain things aren't going to happen when they should. So it's a teamwork, but a DC needs to be a bit of a conductor, not wanting to be the star player in the middle of it all. And again, you have to have the skills and the way that you conduct yourself in properly representing the province. And we've covered that again in the previous etiquette and protocol. Training, we provide from a preparation point of view, quite a detailed training program for our ADCs in the province. We've started already, and this is done with a very nice atmosphere, a safe atmosphere where it's just the DCs, we're all together, we can make mistakes, we can have a laugh, and then we really get into it and we focus and we make sure that it's done correctly before we let anybody else come in and start trying to appraise what we're doing. But training, again, there's got to be a mindset that you've got to be someone that doesn't think you know it all and I don't need training. So DC's got to be really open-minded and prepared to learn, even when they think they might not need it. And as I said earlier, the primary purpose and personality we want is someone who's willing to support and serve and not plan to be the star attraction, because that's not what the role is about. So these are some of the key sort of elements of personality, call them words of wisdom, for a director of ceremonies, be that in a lodge or in the province. And then there's three little sayings I got down the side here, which you've all been reading, I'm sure, and you all recognise the address that they come from. This is on an open platform when it goes on YouTube, so we won't go into too much detail, but we all know it's for the brethren. So what you find praiseworthy in others, you should carefully imitate. And a good DC is always looking at others and learning from them. How do you do that? If we go to the big events, where, be it in Royal Arch, Mark, other parts of masonry, where you see the way that a DC conducts himself, and you never stop learning by studying and enjoying those moments, especially if you're able to see another DC strutting their stuff and it's not you all the time. Humility in each is an essential qualification. Again, the way we conduct ourselves, very important that we are approachable and open when we visit a private lodge, and that we're not going there with a persona that says we know it all, because we can't go in and do that as a private lodge. And hence we learn to be meek, humble and resigned. The whole idea is that we are just under the level, we're just underscoring the fantastic opportunity that the lodge has got to have a ruler or a representative there, and we are there to support them and make sure that everything goes through. So again, it's just being prepared to do the work and maintain that throughout without expecting any great reward. The guidance book, which I've mentioned, this was a document that, it's been plagiarized by us all over the years, and this is my latest plagiarized version. So it goes right back to quite a few years ago when the provincial DCs did this. But the booklet itself, I've rewritten it into a format which actually goes through. And if you can see on your screens there, hopefully it's not too small, but we actually go through every element of what you need to do as a DC in the province. And I try to cover every potential opportunity of, what could go wrong, what should you do right, what do you do in this situation, what do you do if a certain past ruler suddenly attends and you're not expecting them. So we go through about how you do the preparation. So for a DC, and of course lodge DCs, you'll be going through exactly a similar process, I hope, when you're preparing meetings in your own lodge. we obviously attend a large number of installation ceremonies, so it can be, this is quite focused on that. But the DCs have to be able to do certain checks when they arrive at the lodge room, making sure that everything is right. The most key part of that obviously is the warrant. We'll come on to that in a moment. So this booklet explains to a DC exactly how to form your columns, how to get the brethren into the lodge room, how to do the salutes, who you should be saluting, in what order, what rank. It goes through all the details as a reference guide. Experience counts for everything, and the book is obviously very, very useful, and it's there as a permanent reminder and a quick look up if certain things happen. But as with any role that we have in life, sometimes you have to do the job. We make sure, hopefully, that the ADCs that come to visit you and attend your lodges with a ruler or representative are as prepared as they can be. But there's nothing better than having experience. We also go through all the details in respect to when can you do absent brethren, you know, how do you handle the wine takings in certain scenarios, and also the toasts, how they're done. And all this is learnt at the training, and it's there as part of it. So from a point of view of a DC, the booklet itself covers all the attributes in terms of what the job is. So it describes the brief, and there's not a lot, I think, that's missing from that. But it's very important, obviously, that when we go through the training, the brethren that are DCs really do adhere to the way that Warwickshire does it. Provinces do work in different ways, but we like Warwickshire to be done in the way that we do, and we like to maintain that. So that's a quick run through there of what the DCs do. The cue card I've mentioned, we'll just very quickly flash this up. I won't go any further into it, but basically we have an Excel system, and it's got drop-down boxes. So if we're planning to prepare for a meeting, we're communicating with the lodge secretary, the lodge DC, the master, and anybody else that we can get hold of if we need to. And we prepare this. So you click in on the boxes and it drops down, it gives you the dates, it'll click on which venue, we just select it. We click on whether it's an installation, a long service certificate, a banner dedication, a centenary, whatever it is, there's a drop-down list that comes down here. And we also provide salient details about how the lodge is going to be open, which is why if we contact you, we're saying, do the wardens answer for all positions, or do your brethren do? Because it's nice if the ruler in the chair can know that he's now expecting to talk to the inner guard, he's expecting to talk to the junior deacon rather than just the wardens answering for everybody. So this book, this cue card, as I say, it's got all the drop-down boxes, and it goes through and it provides all the salient information. We spoke about etiquette and protocol many a time a few weeks ago about communicating with secretaries, and here we're actually jotting down who the grand officers have said they're going to be attending, and we also jot in here who the acting officers are, and that helps with this salute preparation. So again, this is a document that from all the training that we do and all the communication that the administrative work that the DC has to do, as well as other duties, to make sure that the ruler and the representative are fully armed with the most recent information. The most important thing, of course, is what we're having for dinner, and that's down the bottom there. So that's the cue card. And when you go into a lodge room, again, the DC part of the role is to make sure that everything is right and proper, that there's going to be no last minute glitches. We're not there to take over, we're there to support the lodge, and therefore we'll go through, we do a quick check of the lodge room, and we'll be asking questions. So, by the way, Brother DC, have you got the apron ready? By the way, have you got the Book of Constitutions, and is it the latest one? And we just go through, we do a checklist, because these are important. Making sure that the great lights, the volume of sacred law, and the jewels, make sure that they're pointing the right way round, and that the warrant is on display, and it's the correct warrant, not a centenary, it's the actual warrant. The gavels, the gauntlets, everything, and are the pedestals in the columns, in the right position in the lodge room in terms of the Ionic. Senior warden has a Doric, and the Corinthian, the junior warden's pedestal. So we make sure that everything is regular and right. The tracing boards are correct. We no longer have the Tyler from Stirling Road. We used to think it was funny to swap the boards over when your back was turned. I have to say it was hysterical. And we also make sure we've got an up-to-date toast list, and that the aprons and things that the worshipful master and master-elect are going to be exchanging have been tried on so that they can go through. So these are some of the checklists. And again, a DC needs to be confident to go through and check this. And if it's not right, to just ask the questions and fix it. So there we go. So let's just, from the new part of the presentation, if you like, I'm just going to divert into what the current understanding is and just share with you where we are in terms of the COVID-19 precautions. Now, I know that you've all been in communication with the Provincial Office. You've also probably following the Twitter feed of Dr. David Staples and various Twitter feeds and information that's coming out from the United Grand Lodge of England. But I've just been asked to add this in just to give an update as to where we are at the moment, because obviously you will be looking at proclaiming worshipful masters or installing worshipful masters on the basis that we are now able to consider starting up again once everybody deems it safe to do so. So the publication, the key publication that is excellent to refer to is the COVID craft adaptations for installations, and that's been provided by the United Grand Lodge of England. This is on a public platform, so I won't go into any great detail, but some of the salient parts are that no object during a meeting should be touched by more than one person in the course of the meeting. I know we all might think that's pretty obvious, and we might be wearing gloves, well, the gloves doesn't help, does it? So just be mindful of having to work around the fact that you can't exchange wands if you're investing. You have to be very careful about how that's going to be done. And chairs, if you've got the opportunity, not every lodge room can do this because the furniture is the furniture, but if you've got armless chairs, it's nice to use those. Again, that can help the risk of cross-contamination. So these are subtle things that are really important, or subtle, very important things that we need to do to make sure that we can provide the safe environment when we do get back. When we are assisting brethren in the ceremony, any form of walking around the room, I know we like to do that in a very nice way when you're assisted and guided, but we can't do that. So we have to make sure that anything we do does not break social distancing rules. And if the new master is to be installed rather than a proclamation proclaiming the worshipful master, the fact that he's staying where he is, if a new master is to be installed, it's recommended that the outgoing worshipful master, who's obviously going to be doing the ceremony, should wear the IPM jewel and collar, etc., from the outset, again, so that he doesn't have to take it off and share it during the course of the ceremony. We can all see that this detracts from the ceremony, it dumbs it down, doesn't it? But this is a private choice for a lodge whether they want to go through and actually do an installation or not, and assuming that they've got the timing right and the election hasn't happened, and things can be done with emergency meetings. But please refer to the Provincial Office for latest guidance. Keep your eye on the information that's coming out from the Provincial Office. As I say, there's information from the United Grand Lodge of England. Dr. David Staples has a Twitter feed, which is Ask Dr. David Staples, and there you'll see some of them, if not most of the questions that we are all considering have been asked, and he's giving the United Grand Lodge of England's opinion, but we must check through the province. Our authority is through the province, and we must check with them if we've got any questions. Current contingencies, or circumstances rather, will likely mean, as I think we're preparing for, that a large number of lodges would have already decided that their worshipful master is going to continue in office for a second year. So if I come back to proclaiming, and as we know, a worshipful master, if he's staying in the chair, he's being proclaimed, he's not being reinstalled, as he's not left the office. We all commit to, when we go through the chair, until the next regular period of election within the lodge, and until a successor shall have been duly elected and installed in his stead. So we are the master until such time as that happens. Clearly, if a master does not wish to continue, then there's another situation which is quite difficult, because he ultimately would need to resign from the lodge, which he wouldn't want to happen. If the lodge is able to meet, the worshipful master is obviously elected by the brethren in the meeting prior, as would normally happen. So that's just a regular situation. But if it's a proclamation, in Warwickshire, there's a guidance booklet that's been produced. And again, this is available through the office. On the summons, it would say, as a recommendation, to acknowledge and proclaim the worshipful master, worship brother XYZ, as master for the ensuing year. And that's all that's needed. And proclaiming a master for a second year can all be done in the first degree. It doesn't have to be done in the third degree. So if the lodge has sufficient past masters in attendance and wish to conduct the ceremony through the 3 degrees, as I was just about to say, there is a Warwickshire guidance script for how this can be done. And it does make it a more fulfilling experience for the master and lodge, even though he's remaining in the chair. But under the circumstances of where we are at the moment, not knowing if it's just going to be a quorum or how many brethren are going to be present, the expectation is that it's all going to be done in the first degree and will be a very quick process. And equally, care needs to be taken that if your lodge does decide it wants to go up and down in the 3 degrees, that you haven't got brethren that are not able to stay in the room, because again, if you've got a low attendance, that would preclude them. So we just have to be careful. There's no need to have an installed masters in place or place any wardens in the chairs as installed masters because there's no board of installed masters. The inner guard can be the regular inner guard, you don't have to replace him. And once you get to that item on the summons, the DC, preferably or presumably, will move to the centre of the lodge, take a step and give the sign and say, worshipful master, you haven't been re-elected as master of this lodge. Whom do you appoint? Senior warden. And then he appoints the officers. And the investiture continues in the normal way. Addresses, there's no requirement to give the address to the master if it's rolling over. Always be mindful, of course, that there's, if you've had initiates and the initiates entered apprentices are attending, they may not have heard it before. So there's always that to consider in any decision that a lodge makes, but it's a private lodge decision. If neither wardens have changed, again, there's no requirement to have to do the address to the wardens. But if one of the wardens has changed, then the address to the wardens should really be given. And if you have a warden change, it's likely to mean that there's been some change in the officers further down the line, in which case the address to the brethren should be given. But again, a lot of lodges like to do the address to the brethren even when it's a proclamation. And it's something to consider, again, especially if you've got entered apprentices that have joined in the year. They may not have heard that wonderful piece of work. There's no need to present the working tools also. And the warrant is still under the worshipful master's keeping, so again, you don't need to represent that. Also, the Book of Constitutions and Bylaws, he knows them inside out and backwards by now, so there's no need to point those out to him. And the past master's jewel won't be presented, obviously, until the next time there's an election and his successor is installed in his stead. And at this time, with the rulings that we're working to, and rightly so, there's no festive boards to be undertaken at this time, and we're all waiting for further guidance on this from the United Grand Lodge. But at the moment, we're not going to be holding festive boards, I think, as we all know. So the installation of a new master remains one of the most significant events in the life cycle of the lodge. And a very serious consideration is being given by lodges throughout the province as to whether it's best to allow the incumbent master the opportunity to remain in office for a second year. And this is totally the choice of the private lodge. The resumption of Masonic activity, albeit under the strict and proper guidelines and the duty of care that we owe to each other, does allow for lodges to recommence their programme and carry out an installation, provided there are sufficient installed masters available to perform the ceremony. And the DCs, when they come out, assuming that everything goes to plan, in terms of forming processions in and out of the lodge, we clearly will be making some decisions as to the viability of doing that in the short to medium term. So it may or may not happen at every meeting. We have to be very careful, don't we, brethren? The ceremony itself remains the same, but does the COVID-19 restrictions, so let me come on to that, places the COVID-19 places restrictions in terms of the use of the lodge equipment, the great lights, movable jewels, etc., any wands, etc., that are used in the ceremonies. Unfortunately, the reward for our labour, the festive board, is not permitted at this time, which, as we know, is otherwise an important part of the new Master Masons evening. The decision is based on best advice and instruction, which at the moment is emanating from the Grand Registrar at United Grand Lodge. And a new master might wish to bring with him at any ceremony a personal copy of his preferred volume of the sacred law, be it the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah, or other preferred volume, in order to take his oath properly and safely, using his own private volume of the sacred law. And again, this is all about just making sure that we're erring on the side of caution in everything and anything that we do. The installing master is encouraged to wear the regalia of the IPM, which we mentioned earlier from the outset, to help prevent any risk of cross-contamination by sharing a collar, etc. And it's recommended that past masters occupy the wardens and inner guard positions from the outset and for the closings, so that they are occupied by one member only. So if you put a new warden in, he won't be going into the chair by preference, because that can bring cross-contamination. We can all see just how tricky the choreography can be in the new world that we're in this short-term period, hopefully. The same with handling gavels and columns, etc. That should be done by one brother throughout the whole of the evening. And social distancing must be adhered to in everything that we do and in all parts of the meeting, including when you bring a master up to take an obligation where we normally guide him up. There should be social distancing on their own. The Book of Constitutions and Bylaws, etc., would normally be handed over, but again, they will be in view. It's recommended they be in view and pointed out, not touched. And the same with the warrant. That should be handled by one brother only during the evening and pointed out. Advice on charity collections has already been given by the president of the 2023 festival in an earlier presentation that we had, and that included how to do this hands-free, remotely. So if you want more information on that as well, it's worth contacting the office, because there is advice on charity collections, which again, I know that we're all keen to get going once we get back. And in the same way, advice has already been given, and it probably will be reminded about how to do ballots, if that's part of what we're having to do in the slight resumption that's going to be taking place. And that included how to do a ballot using paper slips rather than the tokens or anything else, which again could be handled by multiple people. If you've got any specific concerns, please contact the provincial office. You can contact myself, and then there's also the good old-fashioned, which I've lost, I'll put it down somewhere, the good old-fashioned Book of Constitutions. If you look at rules 105 to 108, there's not a lot of that book won't put you right on. Clearly, we take our advice, though, from the province and the provincial office, but there's guidance available if you can't get hold in the short term. But we must take our advice and instruction through from the provincial office. So some of the frequently asked questions at the moment, and I'm sure there'll be lots of others, what I would encourage is that rather than having a forum today, because I think there's a potential that we could be on for quite a long time. So I would advocate, if you don't mind, brethren, that any questions you may have, if you can contact me through the email that's on the link, or contact the office. But the advice is really there, it's crystal clear. We'll be able to tell you exactly what is possible or what isn't possible. And as a private lodge, then you can make your own decisions as to what you wish to do with that. So one of the questions I'm asked quite frequently, and even yesterday and this morning, is can you proclaim a master in his absence? Well, the answer to that at the moment is no. He does need to be there if he's being proclaimed. But of course, he still is the master. It's just the act of actually proclaiming him needs to be done when he's there, not at any other time. And do you have to proclaim him in the third degree? And the answer is no. that can be done in the first degree, as I've explained a little earlier. So I hope this is as quick as I can get through the current situation, giving some guidance and instruction, if you like, about what it is to be a DC, what the skill set is of being a DC in the province. So I do hope it's been useful so far. I was conscious that last time I ran over a bit, so I think I'm about right at the moment. We haven't finished quite yet, though, because what I'd like to do is to invite you all to think about the current situation of what we're all going through, vis-a-vis the potential return to some form of normality, who knows. But equally, from what I've explained, what I consider to be the skill sets and the attributes of a DC, if you want to listen to a poem, and I've been able to invite a celebrity to join us, not a lot of people know that, and he's going to read a poem, and what I would like you to do is just listen. It's only a 2-minute read, the poem. If you listen to it, and try and identify as many phrases as you can that you think are applicable to being a Lodge DC or a Provincial Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies, and then we'll go through and we'll check them out. So bear with me.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowances for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor look too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life for broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at the beginning, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are done, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 40 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
So, brethren, let me drop that down. Can you see my screen again? Hopefully you can see the screen again. Some of the phrases that ring true as being a DC, but I think there's a lot of lines in the poem that we just heard that reflects what some of us might be feeling about what we've all been through. But the good news is obviously there is a resumption, and we hopefully will be back once shielding and circumstances allow. I know there's quite a few of us waiting for vaccines and things to come on site, but that's for others, isn't it? So, certainly, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, well, I think that probably says it all in terms of what it is to be a DC. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. There are times where you really do have to be quite trusting in the training and preparation that you've done. And to help to make events go through in the way that they should, you sometimes have to be really quite firm to stick to the plan and make sure that comes through. Oh, sorry, here we go. If you can wait and not be tied by waiting. I think as a DC, we've all been in a position whereby the festive board, everybody's having fantastic fun and the clock's ticking and you're wanting to get the, in a private lodge, you wanted to get the wine takings going or the toasts starting without gavelling. But if a DC does stand up and gavels once or calls the brethren to order, sometimes it can take a little while in a very large room for the word to get around. But if you wait as a DC, same as when you take the floor, silence does suddenly come through. So you have to be confident in waiting sometimes as a DC. I quite like that one. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, well, you dream when you're no longer in the now. And as I said earlier, we stay in the now as DCs. We never drift off into dreamland as an ADC. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim, well, we have to be firmly fixed in delivering the best ceremonial we can, whilst at the same time having the ability to think quickly when circumstances require a change of plan at short notice. We sit very close to the ruler and representative in the lodge meeting, and sometimes they may wish us to help in some way or do something else for them. And so we have to be able to know that we're in the now, what's coming next, but also to be conscious of the ability to think and not get confused by it all. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, I always struggle with this one, but I think that we just do our job to the best of our ability. And as with anything that we do in our hobby, when we're going through the playlets and the roles we have in our lodges, it's up to others to decide whether we deserve any plaudits or otherwise, or whether we deserve any negative comments or critiques. So that's a difficult one for us but as we all know, triumph and disaster, it depends who's making the call on those. Because one man's triumph might be another man's disaster, mightn't it? And if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, very important in the role that you have as a DC to be able to communicate with the very highest in our order, in our hobby, as well as with the new brethren that come through. We should maintain the Masonic principles of equality in all that we do. It's just that, unfortunately, in some occasions, there are some that are more equal than others, but that's the way it goes. If you can fill the ungiven minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run. Well, what's interesting is that in the recital that Sir Michael Caine just read, which is from YouTube live on the feed, the book that he has, he actually reads 40 seconds worth, but he keeps going. I think you can just see the glint in his eye that he knows that the text is wrong, but he keeps going. And that's exactly what a good DC will do when the time is right, that rather than causing unnecessary undue commotion, it's different when we're doing the protocol and ceremonial at the big events, but as we all know, as a prompter, sometimes it's best just to let it go rather than pick somebody up on it. So I just thought I'd throw that one in because I picked up on it, and I'm sure quite a few of you learned brethren out there probably did the same. So, just to say thank you again for your attention on this presentation. I hope it's been useful. I've tried to frame it. I keep repeating again, please contact the province with any questions about the current circumstances as to how to proclaim and carry out the ceremonials. It's all starting to crystallise, come together, but of course we are in early days, and whatever we do, we've all got to stay safe, haven't we? And we are each other's keeper. So all I'd say is thank you very much, brethren. Please contact me if you've got any questions, and also the provincial office. And Lemonade, here's to our next happy meeting. Thank you, brethren.
Thank you very much, Peter.